What's up guys, Justin here with TheSketchUpEssentials.com. So in today's video, we're going to talk about how we can model different styles of cabinets inside of SketchUp. Let's go ahead and just jump into it. Alright, so specifically in this video, I wanted to talk about making styles of cabinets for architectural use in your models. This is less of a woodworking tutorial and more of something that you would use if you're trying to model out for architectural visualization. And so the first thing we want to do is we want to start by roughing out the back of our cabinet. Because when you think about it, right, the cabinet is the box that you create plus the doors. Well, in this situation, we're going to start by roughing that shape out. And so we're going to start by simply drawing a box. And so to do that, I'm just going to use the line tool. So I'm going to tap the L key on my keyboard. I'm going to single click and I'm just going to draw a box that's the depth of the cabinet I want to create. In this case, it's going to be 2 foot 3 inches deep right here. This particular cabinet, I'm going to give it a width of 2 foot 6 inches. That's obviously going to vary depending on the width of the cabinet that you need to create. I mean, cabinet widths are variable. So you're going to draw this to whatever size you want your cabinet to be. But then I'm just going to take this and I'm just going to extrude it up to what I want the height of the cabinet to be. And in this case, I'm assuming the height of the cabinet is going to be 2 foot 10 inches right here. And so one thing that most cabinets have is they have kind of a kick recess in here. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to create that. And all you need to do that is tap the L key. I'm going to draw a line up and we're going to do 4.5 inches right here. Then I can draw a line across and I can push pull this back. And I'm assuming this is going to recess back by 3 inches, right? And so what we've got here is we've got kind of a basic cabinet block. Now, if you're a woodworker, you're going to come in here and you're going to model all of the different like wood pieces in here that make up a cabinet. We can do that maybe in a separate video. For now, though, I'm just going to offset this in a little bit by whatever the thickness of the wood that I might use is in here. So maybe like 3/4 inch or something like that. But then I'm just going to push pull this down so that I've got kind of a hole in my cabinet. And I'm not being ultra precise because really what I'm showing is kind of the door style or the drawer style. In here, it's intended to be used from the front like this so that you can see what those boxes are going to look like. And then once you get all your cabinets in your scene, that's usually when you come in here and you actually add your countertops on top as kind of a separate object. So for right now, we're just going to use this base block as kind of a building block. And so the first thing that I want to do is I want to model some very simple cabinet doors. And so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to use the move tool in copy mode. I'm going to move this over right here. And obviously there's a bunch of different kinds of cabinets that you might want to create, right? From very simple cabinets with no detailing on the doors all the way through very complex things with like louvers and things like that. But the first thing that we want to do when we're working on a cabinet is we want to come in here and we want to start by modeling out a door profile. And so the easiest way to model out the door profile is going to be just by drawing a simple rectangle. So I'm going to tap the R key right here and I'm going to draw a rectangle up on this surface. And so this first cabinet is just going to have a simple flush face on it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to push pull this out by the thickness of the material that you're going to use to create the door. In this case, we're going to call this 3/4 of an inch. And so what we've done is we've created a cabinet door in here. Now, one thing I recommend when you're working with doors is I recommend that you take them and you create a component. So in this case, I'm going to make this a component and I'm going to call this cabinet dash flush door like this. I'm going to click on create. Make sure that you've checked the box for replace selection with component when you do that. But now what I've got is I've got one door in here. And so it's very simple then to make a copy of this object. So you can just use the move tool. So I'm going to tap the M key right here. So I'm going to tap the M key, I'm going to single click on this corner, and I'm going to move my mouse. Well, remember that to go into copy mode, you need to tap the control key like this. And so now we've got two simple doors on our cabinet. Now, a couple things about this. So the first thing is if you're going to take this to a rendering software or anything like that, or if you're just trying to make this realistic, you want to have a gap between these doors. And so what you can do to have a gap between these doors is you can just double click in here, and then you can use the push pull tool. So I'm going to tap the P key, and you can go into x-ray mode if you want to see that face, but I'm just going to single click in here, and I'm just going to push pull this back by like a 1/16 of an inch, right? So something very small, but enough that we're going to have a gap in there. Now, one thing you might notice though is when we do this, this door over here is getting push pulled on this side, which is not necessarily what we want. We're going to fix that in a second, but I want to show you how to add some hardware on here first, just so you can kind of see what this is doing. So let's go ahead. We're going to toggle x-ray mode off, and I'm just going to double click in here, and I'm just going to rough out my piece of hardware. The first thing I would recommend is, if you can avoid modeling your own hardware, avoid modeling your own hardware. So you can go into the 3D warehouse and you can find things like cabinet pull, like this, and you can actually find the pulls that you want a lot of the time that are already kind of pre-made, right? You've got collections of cabinet pulls in here. You can usually find what you are looking for just by doing that, and that's usually what I recommend. I mean, the top pulls are in here so that you wouldn't have to model those yourself. So if you can get away with not modeling out things like pulls, I would highly recommend that. Now, just from a simplicity's sake, say that you did want to model out a simple pull. So I'm just going to use the tape measure tool in order to create a guide in here. But I'm going to move this down to whatever, 2 inches, and then maybe another 2 inches right here. And basically I'm just using this to rough out where that pull might happen. So in this case, it might be off of this edge by, and we want to kind of scroll in just a little bit, but we might pull this off of the edge by maybe an inch or something like that. I'm totally making up those dimensions. If I'm breaking some kind of cardinal rule of hardware, I apologize, but you should be able to use this method to create whatever size you want in here. But if I was going to create a simple pull where this is just kind of off of the face a little bit, so maybe like half an inch, like this, what I might do is I might just draw some edges out and then just really quickly draw some circles in here. One thing I'm noticing when I'm modeling these dimensions is it's kind of jumping around on me a little bit. So I'm using this zoom extents button in order to kind of zoom back out and then zoom back in. Alternatively, you could also set up a scene. So you could just go to View, Animation, Add Scene, so that then if you get in here and you run into that issue, you can just click on the scene right here and it'll bring you back. And that jumped around a little bit, but that's okay. But then what I would do in this situation is I would just rough out the vertical. So say we're going to have maybe an inch overhang on the top, an inch overhang on the bottom, which is a lot, but that's okay. But then you might just come in here and you might just draw a circle, which is going to be whatever the profile of this is going to be. So maybe a 1/16 of an inch again. And then I might take that circle, I'm going to use the move tool in copy mode and copy it down. But then we could just extrude this out so that it aligns with this edge. We're going to extrude, this out so that it aligns with this edge as well. And one thing I'm not doing that I probably should be doing, and we can do this in a second, is we're probably going to want to group this geometry. And in this case, I'm going to say this has a radius of 1/8 of an inch, so that this is a little bit bigger. But I'm just going to push pull this down so that it aligns with the end of this line right here. But then I'm just going to take this whole thing and I'm just going to make it a component, and we'll just call this cabinet pull right here. And so then within this group, you can erase out the guides. And so this is what I wanted you to see is we've got our pulls in here, but notice how because of the way we copied this across, this pull is on this side of this object. What I would probably do in this situation is I would use the flip tool in SketchUp 2023 and just flip this in place like this. And then I would take this corner and I would align it with the end right here. And now we've got our simple cabinet with our flush doors. like this. And I mean, one thing that you could do is you could model this with the doors and then create a version where you kind of swap out the hardware. Now, one thing that gets a little bit weird about that is because we're using the same component for these doors and for these doors, if I come in here and I delete out the hardware, notice how this hardware is going to go away as well. So what I would want to do is I would want to select both of these by doing a click and then a shift click, right click and make them unique, so that now if I edit them, it's only editing the other object but not these, because we made them unique copies. And so what I would do in this case is I would just come in here, I would delete this out, and in this case we could just delete out these circles where the hardware was in order to change that. But then I might go into the 3D warehouse and pull down maybe some cabinet pulls like these from Karen A and bring them in so that I don't have to model them myself. And then you could pick the one you like, and they're a little bit weird because they're kind of doubled up here. There we go. And so what I might do is I might actually take this one and I'm going to move it across, and I'm going to center it. I'm going to make sure that we're vertically aligned, and then we'll just move this back so that our pull is aligned with the back of our cabinet. And notice how here this is aligned with this one, but then it's showing up in this one as well, just because we use components in order to model this out. So flush cabinets like these are pretty easy to model. All right, so next up we're going to model a shaker cabinet. And so again, we're going to start by drawing a rectangle. And so we're going to push pull this out to 3/4 of an inch, just like we did before. One thing we want to make sure that we do on this one before we do any of our offsets or our work, so we want to make sure that we go ahead and we push pull this by our 1/16 of an inch, so that we're going to have that gap, just so when we do the offset, this doesn't throw that off and make us not even on one side. But what you can do is you can come in here and you can tap the F key, you can move your mouse, and you can type in the length that you want to offset this. So in this case, 2.5 inches, like this. And so that's assuming that you're going to use, I think that's a 1/3 around the outside in order to create this. But then you can just do a Control T to deselect, you can push pull, and you can align with the middle of this object right here. And so one thing about the shaker style cabinets, you don't have to do this, but I like to do this, is I like to actually set up the materials on this so that it actually looks like you made it of wood. We're just going to call this shaker door as a component. But in order to do that, you need to just add some additional geometry. So I'm just going to double click in here. I'm going to use the line tool, and I'm going to draw some lines up like this. And basically what I'm doing is I'm splitting this up so that I have different surfaces in here. And the reason I'm doing that is because the wood grain is going to run different directions on these. So I'm just going to apply some kind of different textures in here. All right, and so next up, let's bring a texture in for this cabinet, and I'm going to use a custom texture because the ones in SketchUp are just pretty low resolution. They generally don't look good, even if you bring the size down. I mean, they look fine, but they're very limited. So let's go bring in another texture real quick. And so we're going to download a wood texture from the website ambientcg.com. I can link to it in the notes down below. It's the wood 27, and it's just kind of a panel material. I don't want to get way in depth on materials. We're just going to download the 2K version, and then you need to unzip that. And so when you unzip it, it's going to look like this. Notice how there's a few different things in here. We're only worried about the color map for right now. But what we want to do is inside of SketchUp, we want to add that as a material. So we're just going to click on the plus button right here. We're just going to call this wood material. You could be more specific if you had multiple different wood materials, but I'm going to check the box for use texture image, which is going to pop up a window, and we're just going to select that color map. I'm going to click on OK, and what I want to do is I want to double click in here. I don't want to just apply it to this whole thing, right? Because if we apply it to the whole thing, we don't have control over the direction of the wood grains. What I want to do instead is I want to double click in here and I want to apply this. And with cabinets, your wood grain is going to go a different direction depending on what your how you've cut up the wood. So in this case, for these, right, the top and the bottom pieces, we can go ahead and we can set this so that the wood grain is facing its horizontal direction. But with the verticals, what I want to do is I'm going to click in here and notice how this vertical is running kind of the short way. Well, in this case, I might cut this the long way with the grain. So what I would do is you want to make sure that you're in the group so that you can select this surface, but I'm going to right click on this and click on texture, and I'm going to click on position. If you try to do this outside of the group, that's not going to exist. You need to double click in the group, have one surface selected, right click and do texture position. Well, then what I can do is I can just right click in here, click on the option for rotate 90, and I can rotate that wood 90 degrees. Well, notice now that wood is facing in a vertical direction. And so I've got versions of this that are running left to right, and I've got versions of this that are running up to down. And in this case, I'm just going to sample the up and down material, and I'm going to apply it to this surface. And then this middle surface, you could go either way, right? You could select the one that's running left to right. You could select the one that's running up and down. I would probably go up and down, but what this has done is this has given us the ability to control the direction of the grain on our door. So it looks more realistic. And if you do need that additional information in here, you can visually see that. Now you could also come in here and you could adjust the size of this material by selecting it in your materials section in InModel, going to edit, and then adjusting the size. So if you feel like the grain is the wrong size or something like that, you could come in here and you could make this adjustment. So really just depends on what you're trying to do, but notice how now we've got this door and this cabinet in here. And then we can just take that wood material and apply it to the whole cabinet as well. But then I'm just going to come in here and use the move tool in copy mode. I'm going to copy this over, and we're going to call this one good. All right, so for this next one, we're going to create kind of a recessed look, but I want to make it wider. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to double click in here, and you can't really scale this to make it wider because what it's going to do is it's going to distort the thickness of your wood in the back. What you can do instead is just double click in here, drag your mouse across this, and pick up just the edges in that side, and you can just move them over by like 24 inches like this. But now we've got a wider box in here, and what I want to do is I want to set this up with some recessed cabinets and drawers. And so remember, with the recessed, what happens is you kind of have a piece of trim around, kind of framing out where those openings are. So in this situation, what I would want to do is I would want to kind of model out that frame first. So I'm going to draw a rectangle across this face, and I'm actually going to right click and hide this cabinet just because I feel like it gets in the way. But what I'm assuming is this is going to be split down the middle, and then I'm assuming that I'm going to have probably some bigger cabinets over here, or some bigger drawers, and then some smaller drawers on the top. And so in this case, I'm just going to divide this like this. So I'm just going to right click and do a divide, and then I'm just going to draw across here like this. And what I'm doing is I'm roughing out where my drawers might go as well as my cabinet door, right? So I'm going to have cabinet over here, and then I'm going to have my drawer over here. And the first thing I want to do is I want to model out that trim. So that trim is going to go around the outside of this. And so the first thing that we're going to do is we're just going to select the outside, or we're going to bring this trim in. And so you can select just these edges and tap the offset tool in order to do this, and you can offset these in by whatever width you want. So in this case, I'm thinking 3/4 of an inch. And then what we need to do is we need to do that same thing for the interiors, which gets a little bit trickier. But what we can do is we can select these edges. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to come in here, and again, we're just kind of splitting this up so that we have a piece of trim in here, but this is going to go 3/8 of an inch this way. I'm going to use the move tool in copy mode and create a copy 3/4 of an inch this way. And then we'll do the same thing here, vertically and horizontally. So move tool in copy mode, 3/8 of an inch, move tool in copy mode. Notice how those are still selected. Make a copy 3/4 of an inch this way, and then you can come in here and you can delete out the extra geometry. It's in here just like this. And so what we've done is we've basically created our trim piece, right? And then I can take this whole thing and I can push pull it to whatever the depth of that trim piece is going to be. Again, I'm thinking probably 3/4 of an inch. One thing you might do is you might double click in here and group all of this before you do that, just so it's not merging with the geometry we're going to use to create our doors. But then I'm just going to push pull this 3/4 of an inch. And then you can tap the E key and come in here and click and drag across this extra geometry that's created in order to smooth all of this out if you want to. Now it'll probably be hidden by your cabinet doors, so it probably doesn't really matter anyway, but you can definitely do that. So now all we need to do is we need to come in here and we need to create our cabinet doors, and we're going to do these in the shaker style again. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to right click and I'm going to hide this surface, and I'm going to offset these in by whatever the gap is around the outside. So in this case, we might say 1/8 of an inch. And then you can mouse over more of these. So you can tap the F key. I'm going to do a Control T to deselect, but I can double click. Whoops. And so we're just going to go ahead and we're going to offset all of these by that same width. Now this one's a little weird because it's going to have 2 doors in it, so we'll worry about that in a second. But we're just going to come in here and we're going to delete out our extra material like this, and then those doors are ready to go, right? We're just going to do our offset again to whatever the thickness is. So we might say 1.5 inches in this case. We might use a different piece of wood, but I'm just going to mouse over these and I'm going to double click like this in order to create them. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do an edit, unhide all like this, just so I can see what's going on in here. But I'm going to push pull these so that they're aligned with the surface right here. And notice how I can just mouse over these and then just double click. And in this case, this is actually going to go halfway into your object. So I can actually mouse over another area in here and align this just so that this is in here accurately. But then I can just double click again in order to extrude these the rest of the way. And so then the doors we're going to handle kind of the same way. I'm going to go ahead and hide this. And you could actually take all of these other pieces right now and you could group them. So what I might do is I might put all of these in a group, and then within that group I might group these, and I'm just keeping these so that they're not going to intersect. But I'm just going to do the same thing with my doors that we did before. So we'll just push pull this out, offset it by whatever the thickness is. I think we're at 1.5 inches right here. We'll push pull this into halfway. We'll erase out our extra detail. Okay, and so before we offset this, we want to make sure that we push pull it over by our 1/16 of an inch right here. I'm going to go ahead and erase out this extra for right now, but we'll offset this in by 1.5 inches. We'll push pull it back so that it aligns. We'll clean up this extra geometry. And I'm going to make this a component right here. We'll unhide. Oops, we need to be outside of this group in order to do this. We'll unhide this. And I will make a copy right here so that we're aligned. So now what we have is we have cabinets that are actually recessed inside of this trim piece right here, like this. And you might end up adding a little bit of a gap on the side here. So you might just take this and just push pull it by 1/16 so that you have a little bit of a gap. But this is a pretty easy way to model this recess casework. Just like building it, it does take a little bit of extra work in order to model it, but you can definitely do that. All right, so next up, we're going to use a profile from the 3D Warehouse. It's the Destined Door profile from Dynasty by, I think it's Andre S. But we're just going to bring that into SketchUp just so you have an idea, because I don't really want to model my own profile. But basically, sometimes you have these more complex profiles where they use a bit, where they come in here and they remove the material and it gives you this more like complex curve in here. Well, what you can do is you can use the Follow Me tool in order to generate a door with this look. So what we're gonna do is I'm actually gonna double click in here, and you could draw this yourself, by the way. I just don't wanna go through and create my own profile. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna erase out everything in this profile that isn't the edge. So we've got the edge in here, and what I wanna do is I wanna use the Follow Me tool to take this in a circle. And generally speaking, what you want is you want to make sure that this width is half the width of your cabinet. And usually when I do this, I take the cabinet door and I lay it out like this, just so I can see the width of the cabinet in here. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull a copy of this profile over here. We're going to take this object, we're going to move it, and we're going to align it. So in this case, I want my door, to be this wide. I'm going to take this, I'm going to move it over a 1/16 so that I still have my space in here, but then I'm going to take the corner, I'm going to align this right here, and I want to make sure this end, and I just selected the end and I'm just moving it over. I've held the shift key in order to lock it to this axis, but I want to lock it to the midpoint of this edge. So I'm just going to come in here and I'm just going to split this by drawing a line over it so that I have a point to inference to. But I'm just going to double click in here. I'm just going to move this until it aligns with that midpoint. That means my dimension is in here properly. And then we can go ahead and we can move this down to align it with the middle of our door right here. And then I'm just going to draw a rectangle on this face to use as a path. And so in this case, I want to move this edge over a little bit. And so in this case, what I want to do is I want to select this face and I want to use the Follow Me tool in order to extrude this. So to do that, I'm just going to erase out this extra edge, but I'm going to select this face. I'm going to activate the Follow Me tool. And remember that this profile is in a group, but the Follow Me tool is selected because I have this face selected, or it's activated, so I can right click on Edit Component, and then click in here like this, and notice what this does is this extrudes this in a circle just like this. Now in this case, I've got some extra edge in here that got created that I can just kind of erase out, but now I've got this cabinet door in here that's got a lot more detail, and it's got that extra detail in here just like this, and then I could just make a copy of it using the Move tool. Now I've got two of these cabinets. Now one thing you could do is you could click in here. I'm going to triple click and I'm going to use the Soften Smooth Edges function right here. So I'm just going to click in here and I'm going to click on the option to Soften Coplanar, and what that's going to do is that's going to soften those edges, and you can kind of play with this angle in order to get the result that you want. But notice how we can use this in order to create these really detailed doors using the Follow Me tool. All right, so next up, say you wanted to create a more complex door, like a louvered door. And so what I've done is I've taken the shaker door that we created already, and we're just going to come in here with that shaker door. Make sure you make these components unique so you're not changing the old copies of this. But I'm just going to delete out this extra material right here, and I'm also going to hide this cabinet. So I'm going to right click and do a hide. And so what I want to do is I want to create a louver in here that I can use in this door, and I want to repeat it. And so to draw the louver, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to come in here and I'm going to zoom in a little bit. I'm going to use the zoom window function because the zoom tool's been jumping around on me a little bit. But we're going to assume that we've got a piece of wood in here that's maybe 1/4 inch thick. So I'm going to draw a line in here, and I'm going to assume these are going to be 1 3/8 of an inch long. And then I want these to be 1/4 of an inch thick, meaning I need to draw a line 1/8 of an inch one way and then 1/4 of an inch the other way, so I can have this louver piece. That way this piece is not as thick as my cabinet door. But then I'm going to tap the A key and I'm going to draw an arc in here. Notice how I can move my mouse and draw things like half circles like this using the arc tool, and then you can just move them so that they align with the ends right here. So I'm going to move this up, and then I'm just going to do a shift click and I'm going to select out this extra material like this. Then I'm just going to hit the delete key. So now I've got one louver piece in here, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to push pull this across, and then I'm just going to triple click on it. I'm going to make it a component, and we're going to call this Louver. And I'm going to click on create. So then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this and I'm going to activate X-ray mode just so I can see in here a little bit better. But what we're going to do is we're going to use the move tool in copy mode to create copies in here. But before we do that, we're probably going to want to rotate this. So I'm going to do a zoom window. I'm going to tap the M key to activate the move tool, and then I'm going to rotate this just a bit so that the ends kind of align right here, like this. So now what I've got is I've got this louver piece, and I can start making copies. And so in this case, what I want to do is I want to use the move tool in copy mode, and I want to create a copy of this piece. So tap the M key, click on this, and then tap Control, and we're going to move our mouse down. So I'm going to hold the Shift key, and I'm going to align this piece right here just by clicking. Now before you do anything else, I'm going to type in / and a number of copies. So I've typed in divided by 10, that's not enough copies, divided by 11, divided by 15. I'm just typing in / and the enter key, and that's creating copies in here, like this. So in this case, this might be good. And remember that with a 3-button mouse, you can zoom in and out without turning this tool off, just to kind of look at this and make sure it gives you what you want. But in this case, I think this looks pretty good. I think we've done a pretty good job of getting these louvers in here. So now what I need to do is I need to take those louvers, I need to select them, and I need to put them inside of this door component. So in this case, I'm going to do a Control X, double click so that I'm inside of this component, and then do an edit, paste in place. Notice how now those louvers exist inside of this cabinet door right here, giving us the ability to have them be in both components because we added them to this component. This is a copy of that component, so this is going to show up as well. So now I've got this louvered door. And we can do an unhide all, and that's going to give our cabinet, that's going to give us our cabinet behind this. And then finally, I'm going to use the move tool in copy mode, and I'm going to copy this right here. I'm going to take these two doors, right click and make them unique, and then I'm going to erase out the louvers. And in this case, we want to do something similar, but we want to do this with a beadboard on the inside of our cabinet. So to do that, what we can do is we can actually go into the 3D warehouse, and there's actually a beadboard profile from Certainteed. And we'll go ahead and we'll pick this first beadboard profile right here and bring it in. And so notice what that does, and we're going to go ahead and we're going to hide this cabinet again. Notice what that does is that brings that beadboard profile in. Well, then we can use this in order to create a panel in our model. And so to do that, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to rotate it like this. And we're going to align it with our surface. And so in this case, I want to take something that's close to the midpoint and align it with the midpoint of my panel like this. But what I want to do is I want to move this over, and you can move it so that it's inside of this cabinet. That's probably going to be okay as long as it's not showing through. So if I look at this right here, this might be a little thick, so I might scale it back like this, just for visibility's sake right here. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this, I'm going to double click into it, and I'm going to push pull it so that it aligns right here, and it aligns right here. And then we can take that piece and we can copy it. And again, X-ray mode is super helpful for this kind of thing, because what you can do is you can use the move tool in copy mode. You can see where this piece is going to go, and you can just snap it in there. And in this case, what I could do is I could do a ×2 and hit the enter key. And if there's too much of that in here, by the way, remember that these are copies of a component. You can right click on it and make it unique, and then come in here and delete out some of that additional material if you don't want it. A lot of the time, I think the best way to do that is just to come in here and draw a line across the surface. And then this is a profile, so I can just push-pull it down, but you do want to make sure that you've made all of the different component properties in here unique, so it's not affecting these other pieces. But this one, I can just push-pull it down like this until it's aligned to the bottom, and that's going to erase out that extra. And then we can get rid of this extra material. And you can do the same thing over here if you wanted to this object. So I could come in here, I could make this unique, and I could make this piece unique. And I could just find where the wall intersects. And then just do that same thing, right? I can use the push-pull tool to remove that material so it's not sitting in my wall anymore. Well, now if I toggle X-ray mode off, I've got a cabinet door with beadboard inside of the assembly. All right, so that's where I'm in this video. Leave a comment below. Let me know if you have any questions about anything we created today. I just love having that conversation with you guys. If you do want to learn more about how to use SketchUp, you can check out my course at the link on this page. But as always, thank you so much for taking the time to watch this, and I'll catch you in the next video. Thanks, guys.